All right, we're going to work on the tiles in the program panel. The tiles here are related to the play buttons in the edit panel. If you click on one, either one of them, it plays. Now, if I hold down the left button and click it, it'll play. If I hold down the right button, as I just did, it shows the metadata for the file. All right, so we recognize two types of clicks. The left click, which causes it to play like that, and I don't really want to hear it, and get rid of that. So that is the left button. If I click the right button, you see the metadata. All right, so how does that happen? All right, we go back to player.glade. Now, here is P1, all right? P1 has in it a label. If you click on the tile in Glade, it'll actually jump to the label, because the label fills the button. The button is set to a certain size, but the label fills the button. What's the label? Label is going to be the name of the file to be played. We don't know what it is at the moment, so they all say label. They'll be filled in by the program when it starts running. But when you click it, you get LBL. When you're really going to play games, LBL doesn't do anything at this level. It's meaningful inside the program, but in terms of signals, it doesn't have any signals here. It's the button itself. P1 has the signals. We got P1, P2, P3, P4, and so forth. We also have these labels here. These labels are related to what's going on in P1, but they're not part of P1. They're not in P1. They're on top of P1. They're visibly on top of P1 and on P2 and so forth. I had to go into XML and edit this so you could see it this way. But the only thing that's actually in P1 is the label. Now, okay, I'm on I'm going to be on P1 here to get back over here. If I go into P1, you see there's the ID. It's got this add custom content. The custom content is the label. The label got dragged and dropped onto it. That's why you see it. You don't see any other indication. There's nothing down here to indicate the text that should be in the button, because the button does not have any text of itself. It gets the text from the label that's embedded in it. All right, so packing, it's where to put these things. The buttons are all 160 by 106, and that's why the label stretches to fill the button. Okay, signals, bunch of signals. We'll worry about those some other time. They're messy. Okay, button press event. If I hit either the left or right button on my mouse, I get a button press event first. Then, depending upon which it was, I'll decide what to do next. One of the things to do next, if it was the left button that got clicked or pressed, press is holding it down. Clicked is holding it down, letting it go. Okay. So I get, first of all, the button press event, and I look to see which button it was, left or right. In the case of the left button, I release it, and next thing you know, the clicked is invoked, and clicked causes it to play. So in the case of a right click, I call a function which displays the content of the pop-up, that displays the content of the metadata for the file. Okay, so and these buttons are numbered P1 through P12. All right, let's find some code here. All right, now this when I'm in here, I'm in tiles 1 through 12. This is a function. It's in the common area, and it's got a couple of things in here. But okay, first of all, it's the press event. P1 button press event, P2 button press event, and so forth up through P12. This is the press event. It's a macro. Down here are the clicked event. All right. So let's deal with the clicked first. After the button press events happened, and if it was a left click, a left press and release, that counts as a clicked. Then I will be down here. Here is where I make up 12 functions in order to handle a clicked. Now this is, it's similar to the previous video in that the first number being passed to the macro expansion is the number of the button, P1, P2, P3, and so on. The second number is the number of the play button from the edit panel. So as it turns out here, that this button here, the first button, corresponds to this play button here, this play button being button 3. You can see it up there, button 3. That's button 3 on that panel. this guy here is P1 in this panel. All right, so if you click on P1, and if it is a left click, you'll end up invoking P1 clicked. This is where I create P1 clicked. I create 12 of them in the macro. When I create them, I have the button number, which is the P1 click, number 1 here, the first item, the first parameter. So it's on P, insert number. And this is the concatenation I mentioned in the previous video. This is how you do it in macro. The pound signs are for concatenation. That inserts the value of number 1 between the underscore and this underscore. So it'll look like one piece of text. All right, so it'll say on P1 clicked, and it's got the pointer to the widget of it being clicked, which is the way it comes down. What I do is I invoke button 3. Say the second parameter here is 3. So for button 1, the second parameter is 3. And all I do is call the function on button 3 clicked. It's actually button 3 clicked that plays it. So by clicking the tile, you're actually invoking the code for the play button on the other panel. Got it? And I have to give 2 numbers for each. First one is the number for the would have been nice if I kept them the same, but they're not. The tiles are 1 through 12 in sequential order. The rows are not. So anyway, so I have to have the row number 3, 8, 9, 10. Those correspond to the button numbers on the edit panel. So if you click on the second tile, it invokes the second row, which is button 8 on the other one, and that actually plays the file. So it's very simple, and I pass nulls because if you look at that code, it never uses the information. It never uses the pointer to the widget or anything, or the user data. They're not used in the program, so I don't even bother to pass them. I don't have them. Well, I could look them up, but they could be passed. But they're not used, so I don't bother. I just pass nulls. So anyway, so a left click will end up in one of these macros. This will generate 12 macros, and they will look like P1 clicked, P2 clicked, P3 clicked, and so forth. And inside each of these, it'll invoke on button 3 clicked, on button 8 clicked, on button 9 clicked. You can call the signal handlers. They're just ordinary functions. But that's the signal handler that actually plays it. So the tiles are actually related to the other panel. The other panel was done first. That's why they're related. Okay, so that's the clicked. How about the press? There's the press events up here. Okay, this is 12 press events. And you can see these are simpler. They're just numbered sequentially, 1 through 12, because I got smart when I was doing the tiles. I decided to go 1, 2, 3, 4 instead of creative numbering. Anyhow, okay, so it creates 12 macros. And it will be on P1 button press event, or on P2 button press event, so forth and so on. And it receives the button pointer, it receives an event pointer, and user data, which I actually don't pass any user data, so that's null effectively. Usually, I guess it's null. I don't know what it is. I don't pass it anyway. Notice the backslashes. These are macros. You require them. Notice that you also, if you have to do a comment, you have to do /*//, not double slash, because it'll eat the backslash, which I mentioned in the previous one. Anyway, when we come down here, what I do is I look at the state, the event state. What has happened here? And this is looking at a control mask. If I'm holding down the control key, okay, if I'm holding down the control key, it then, does stuff. And this has to do with dragging and dropping, okay? And it's a special case of dragging and dropping. When you're on one page of the tiles and you want to drag something to another page, it involves holding down the control key, clicking, and then moving to another page and holding down the control key, clicking again, and dropping it. So it's the control key that we're looking at here, control mask, the GDK control mask. It's getting awfully hard to find these masks there. They've improved the documentation to the point that it's unusable. Hopefully they're going to put an index into it someday so we can figure out where they've hidden everything. But Anyway, that's the GDK control mask. It looks at the state, and then it does stuff depending upon it. That's only if you're doing a special type of drag and drop, which is not what we're doing here. Okay, if it's not the control mask, in other words, you weren't holding down a control key on your keyboard when you clicked, then we come down here. I set the drag source to -1 and target to -1. We're not in the process of doing any funny dragging and dropping. I set the cursor to its normal state. This is a GDK item. That's a desktop item. It sets that's the normal cursor, left arrow. There's a collection of cursors that you can use, and I set it to what I consider default, which is a little arrow. Okay, event button. If the event button is 1, all right, if the event button that I got up there, the GDK event button was 1, it means it's a left click, and I don't want to handle it. I returned false. I don't want to do anything. Now, by returning false, the system will then say, well, is there anybody else who wants to talk about this? Because at this point, there's a button pressed, but there's also a potential button clicked. By returning false, the system will continue processing this signal, and the signal it'll send the signal to the clicked handler. Okay. By returning false, it means continue processing. In this case, it means it because it was a left click. If it's a right click, that's the other condition. It calls on a function, brings up a message, and the message is the contents of the metadata for the file. And it returns true, meaning we're not going to process it anymore, which means it won't go to the clicked signal handler. Okay, so when you click on if it's a left click on a tile, it comes down here. The first part of that is a special case if you left clicked while you were holding down the control key. But if you weren't holding down the control key, it looks to see if it's a left key or a right key. If it's a left key, left button, it returns false, which causes the signal to be passed on, and it passes it on to the clicked handler. Otherwise, you pop up the description of the metadata, and when that's done, you return true. It's done because when you click, there's a button on the pop-up that will terminate the message, and it comes back, and you return true, which means means it's been handled. All right, so that's how they're connected.